Now, it's not a very modest thing to say, but I certainly believe that this hour of television is the most honest hour of television because I don't hide how I feel. Now, 9 times out of 10, that's about strong opinions and getting fired up about the issues that you and I have been able to connect over each and every night. But I've got to say that it's also that because I continue to keep focus on the people who, generally speaking, the media doesn't prioritise. Every now and then they'll sort of mention them, but they're not the lead story. The lead story is often famous people or political people or powerful people. But all this year we have been laser focused on cost of living. We've been focused on that not because it has a political consequence, but because it is our fellow Australians, and we live in a country that is incredibly generous, has a wonderful social safety net, but there are too many people that are needing it at the moment, and there are even too many people that are starting to fall through it. Now, we've highlighted that each and every night because while the rest of the people who get paid to talk about politics say, shiny object over here, quick, talk about this. No, we're going to talk about this because this is the reality for millions of people around the country. And sadly, that is going to be even more highlighted this particular Christmas. And while most of us will be having fun, most of us will have bought that wonderful present or maybe one or two more as we choose to spoil our kids or spoil each other, of course the reality is that we need to remember two groups of people. Firstly, the groups of people who are alone this Christmas, and strength and love to all of you. And I know there's a lot of people who used to have big and busy Christmases, but their families have moved away or their partners have passed away, or they have always been on their own. There might be people that are working here but have family somewhere else. And again, strength and love to all of you. You will be in my thoughts in the coming days and, of course, on Christmas Day. But at a time when there's all of these people jumping around on social media about how excited they are to open their brand new expensive presents, there are people who are not going to be able to do that because of cost of living, because of the huge expense that life has, let alone special days or bigger days. And of course, there are kids that are going to know that they're having a different Christmas than anyone else. And I want to say to the parents that are going to be heartbroken that their kids won't have the same Christmas that maybe they had last year, again, I am thinking of you. I can't change that, but I want you to know that someone sees you and someone is thinking of you. Which is why, again, the priority of this program is to lead the program with your situation and to know that as everyone else is smiling, there is some hurt that is out there. As I've said many times before, what all of us can do this Christmas is to take a portion of the money that we spend on presents for ourselves or for other people and give it to charity. There are lots of charities that we've supported all year long. You can do the Humpty Dumpty Foundation if you want to give a donation to little sick babies in regional centres. You can give a donation to Food Bank to make sure that people actually are going to be having food on Christmas Day. You can do it for Turbans for Australia as they literally set up free food stalls. And I hope that you do make the most of that opportunity to give, as difficult as life may well be for yourself. But we learn again today about the number of people who are cutting back. And it's not a few on the fringes, it's 2/3 of Australians are planning to spend less or buy less because of the cost of everything this Christmas. As the Sydney Morning Herald put it, the cost of living crisis is hitting Christmas and it's not going away. Now, the reality is that while the editorial of the Herald is very nice to mention it, they are part of the group that want to move on from the cost of living conversations. But here's the polling. The Christmas has now become a luxury for too many people. Now, I'll read these out so you don't have to squint. 60% of people say that they are finding it harder to make ends meet compared to this time last year. 66% of people say that they will be spending less on Christmas. 68% of people will be buying fewer or less expensive presents this year. 63% of people will be spending less on celebrating when it comes to meals or going out. And 52% of people will not be travelling or going away as much as they did last year, all because everything's bloody expensive. So again, as people who are lucky enough, like myself, to be able to spend time away, to go somewhere, to have a holiday, I'm thinking of the people who aren't able to do it. As we exchange gifts, think about the people who are not able to do so. And again, please give money to charity. That will be able to help some, but not all of these people. Also, think twice about the members of your family that you know that are struggling. You don't turn around and make them feel bad by giving them $50, but find a way to make their life easier on Christmas Day by maybe taking a little bit more of the load, or find a way maybe to buy a present that you know they can't afford for their kid or grandkid. It's something we could all do for each other, and it doesn't have to be $500. It's just something extra to make sure that that day that we all remember as a kid is one that lots of kids around the country will hopefully not associate with difficult financial times. But there are people who, believe it or not, in modern 21st century Australia that's got so much money for $300 billion worth of submarines and tens of billions of dollars for renewable energy projects, but not enough money to eat. There are food lines that are, of course, growing as we speak. Now, according to something that was in The Age today, the Melbourne Food Bank, and again, you can donate to them, they've seen a 12-fold surge in demand going into this Christmas. This is what it looks like. These are normal people in a major capital city in Australia. Melbourne's food banks say that they are overstretched and under-resourced in the lead up to Christmas. One service in the inner north is grappling with a 1,200% surge in demand. The Collingwood Drop-In Community Centre and Food Relief Hub, the Wellington, was providing groceries to about 40 people a week at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, and last month the charity was handing out frozen meals to more than 500 people every 7 days. That is in the space of 2 years. So while the lockdowns have ended for most, the financial lockdowns have got worse for others. Over the past year, the service has gone from distributing 7,400 kilograms of fresh produce and 700 frozen meals a month to now 12,000 kilograms of fresh produce and 2,000 frozen meals. If you want to help them, search for the Wellington or the Collingwood Drop-In Community Centre. And then, again, one of the people who helps out in all of this, their manager, Chris, says, we're seeing more people turn up that would probably call themselves middle class. They're saying they need to choose between food and rent, so they're coming to us for food. And that's something that we've learnt about when we spoke to all sorts of charity people this year, is the types of people that are coming to them. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, think about it if you had to do it. It's not an easy thing to do. There's some shame associated with it. And people who have never been in that scenario but still have had jobs, and as we've spoken about before, there's about 900,000 people in Australia who have more than one job, and even then they still can't get the ends to meet because cost of living has gone up. The supermarket's more expensive, the rent's more expensive. All of that becomes huge ongoing problems. Power, all of that continues to be more expensive. Now, the CEO class, and it's nice that they sleep outside for 1 day a year with the Viddies sleep out, but what have they done to help these people? I hope all of them have donated a significant amount of money that is either raised by their staff or from their companies to people who need it this Christmas. Not because it makes them look good, but because it's the right thing to do. Anyone who's got a little more needs to do their bit for those that have a whole lot less. Not government doing it, just you and I doing it. But again, the same polling that told us about the number of people who are going to be pulling back over Christmas, well, have a look at this. Because this is why I get so angry about the Prime Minister and his promise about everything's going to be cheaper if a Labor government was elected back in May of last year. Well, of course, everything's got more expensive. He told a lie. Because all the signs were that things were going to get more expensive, but he told a lie. And people are suffering as a result of it. When people are said if they have a major expense of a few $1,000s, like a new fridge, new car repair, would I be able to afford it? Only just over 40% of people say, yeah, that's possible. For people who are, that they would struggle to afford it, I should say. It's about half of all voters. It's about half of everyone with a job. It's 60% of people that would struggle to pay those things who don't have a job. It's even higher than 60% for the people who are on low incomes. Medium incomes, it's above 50%, and people even on high incomes. Now, as we showed you before, the average Australian's got about $12,000 in the bank this Christmas. And a third of people have duck eggs, zero, nothing. Which means if their car breaks down, they will either have to borrow money, get a credit card, or go without. And going without the very vehicle to be able to go around, let alone to be able to afford the petrol, which is why I've been so angry about petrol tax and about why the government needed to do something to make life just that little bit easier, not for the people who can afford it, but for the people who can't. Because that is what Australia is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the place that takes care of people so they don't end up having to choose between paying the rent or paying the food. But of course, we have politicians that just want to make the most of the largest taxing government of all time, because more people have a job, companies are making profits, and obviously the amount of money that's happening right now when it comes to the Australian dollar and exporting of things like resources means these people are happy as Larry. They're on their way towards a surplus for 2 years in a row, which means they manage the economy beautifully. Well, I'm sorry, you can manage the economy beautifully, but when a third of the country has no money in the bank, when people are lining up around food depots, not just on Christmas Day, not like on that one day a year where you get to see people in soup kitchens. No, we're talking about working people who now are so difficult when it comes to money that some of them live in their car. Now, again, you and I can't fix it, and some people say I harp on about it too much. Well, sorry. The responsibility of having enough is to be able to look and help people who need it, which is why we talk about charity on the show, why we try to highlight the people who are struggling, not as a way of doing poverty porn, but as a way of saying that a TV show that is watched by all types of Australians, from the people who have been able to build a life and pay for their own retirement, to those that are living on the fixed incomes of their retirement, the people with kids, no kids, the people who are new conservatives or lifelong conservatives, the people who struggle to make ends meet. And yes, sometimes even the CEOs and the front end of the plane watches the show as well. Well, I want the front end of the plane to know what is happening, not at the back end of the plane, but the people who can't even afford to get on a plane. Instead, they're the ones that put up with the noise, which is why I blow up about things like the second Sydney airport, where the Western Sydney people, well, they get 24 hours of noise. The people who live near Albo, well, they're going to, of course, have a curfew at 10 p.m. So I was pleased to see the government found some money to give to some of the charities that will be helping people over Christmas. But remember, they got $20 billion more than they expected. $20 billion. The best they could crack off was $450 million, which is not nothing, but still, let's not pretend that this is going to change the world. They're in a position to do something, but they're not really doing much. But I had to notice that money was happening. And when it comes to the rental crisis, there was one hell of a story that I saw on a current affair a couple of nights ago. It's about a couple in Queensland. Now, I don't know these people. I've got a bit of a connection to maybe who can get in touch with these people. But if you are somebody who can provide rental accommodation in the Toowoomba area or maybe in the Brisbane area, somewhere in between, I need you to send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au, because these people have been booted out of their house and are now looking down the barrel of living in a tent because rental accommodation is so expensive. Here they were on a current affair.
Some real estate don't want pets, so it's really hard. And we got kids. My kids are frightened. My kids are scared. They're scared of being on the streets.
Kate and Adam only moved into their Toowoomba rental home just months ago with their 3 kids.
It took us a good 4 months and we're applying well over 60 to 80 houses.
They moved here 2 hours west of Brisbane because they couldn't break into the city's rental market.
Now, before you start to think, oh, dole bludgers asking for free money, these are exactly the type of Australian that I'm talking about each and every night. People who try, people who really try, and in particular the dad who served his country.
They didn't give us a reason on why they're doing it. They literally just told us, you got to vacate.
I begged them. I was crying on the phone when they found out I got the notice to leave. I said, How are we meant to live?
Adam's ex-army turned windscreen repairer, Kate, works in aged care, but they're not having any luck securing a lease on another property. So they're packing up, preparing to live in a tent.
That's their reality this Christmas. Again, if you're somebody who has got the ability for this family to have somewhere to live, Toowoomba, Ipswich, suburbs of Brisbane, please get in touch. paul@skynews.com.au, paul@skynews.com.au. I'll try and get in touch with people that we know at a current affair, and then hopefully one hand helps the other and those people will be taken care of. But that's the reality of who I think about when we talk about the cost of living stuff every day. Mum and dad who are working, a kid who deserves a roof over their head, people who've done nothing wrong but just get told by the landlord, sorry, go. Now, I don't know what's happening with that property. I don't know if it's being re-let. I don't know if there's going to be more expensive. I don't know. But all I know is that those people need somewhere to live. And if you're in a position where maybe you've got an Airbnb, maybe think twice about the Airbnb for the 6 months or 12 months and give them somewhere to live. Which is why this story kind of got me. That the Prime Minister spent a week off, and everyone's entitled to a holiday. He, of course, was strategically taking one early in December because there are many political people who hope there's an opportunity for him over summer to emerge as sort of mourner-in-chief if there's bushfires. I mean, just look at The Guardian every day. They're praying for bushfires. Metaphorically, of course. But Albonomics means that he's okay. He got a pay rise this year. Those people, you would assume, old-fashioned Labor voters, the people really struggling, well, those are the people who are left behind. And you would have thought that the guy from the Single Parent Housing Commission, all the rest of it, would be a guy who'd just be acutely aware of the difficulty of people like that, and while he can't look after every person individually, would be focused that when you've got $20 billion, rather than crowing about how amazing your surplus is, or refusing to make things like petrol cheaper for that family to be able to get around because you want to get to a surplus next year, that's not really going to help politically. And also a bit of a tinny here from the Prime Minister. When during his week away that he's just had, he was staying at a winery and he's sampling $500 bottles of wine. You know, okay, the finer things in life, I get it, you're the Prime Minister, but just, again, does this look like the guy who in his DNA gets the people that are struggling, or the guy who has kind of got that in the story of Albo? But the reality is this is a bloke who's now become very comfortable at not just the front end of the plane, but the private plane. That's why politically there are some issues right now when it comes to this particular government. Which again brings me to this conversation about cost of living, about what a responsibility of a government is, about when you have extra, what do you do with the extra? Now, yes, Australia has the best part of almost $1 billion worth of debt. And that was accrued in part because of the guarantees that took place during COVID, and that all would have been worse if Chalmers got his way in opposition. Remember, they wanted JobKeeper to go for even longer, to cover even more people, and they even wanted to buy an airline. So them now pretending they care about debt, no, it's about saying surplus, 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 because we're good with the economy. Well, if the reality of the Australian economy in the lived sense for people is everything that I've been talking about tonight and everything we've been talking about all year, then something's wrong. Something's wrong. Will there always be poor people? Yes. But are we a country that has a safety net to try to take care of them? Yes. Should working parents be going to a charity for food because the rent's too expensive? No. Or their power's too expensive? No. Instead, the Prime Minister will turn around and say, oh, we've done something on cost of living. Yeah, for people with childcare and some people on welfare payments, but what about for the couple who are just working in Toowoomba with their kid? Now, I mention this because the Financial Review is giving us a bit of an insight into the true priorities of these people, and it's not the families that we've been talking about tonight. Because the celebration is a second surplus might be in sight. Yay, we're amazing. Now, of course, the reason they were able to do this was because of soaring taxes. Those soaring taxes, of course, were paid by workers. This government has got more tax coming to it than any government in history. Now, remember what they said about the last mob. Oh, it's the highest tax in government of all time. Well, now they are. But amazingly, third story from the Financial Review here, that there's a chance that in America, to help Joe Biden, they might start cutting interest rates. Now, remember, they've got an inflation figure with a 3 in front of it, which is why the Reserve Bank might start cutting interest rates over there. It probably won't happen in Australia because we've got inflation with a 5 in front of it, and our Reserve Bank has said that until it's got a 3 or a 2 in front of it, we're not moving. But what about that? US rate cuts could aid Labor election strategy. That's what Jim Chalmers thinks. So he's not thinking about lowering in interest rates is good for Australians, it's good for the Labor Party, because the Labor Party won't get turned around and be constantly blamed for the environmental circumstances that see normal, average people struggling to the extent where they're pulling back on what they give their kids for Christmas, on the fact that working people have to line up for food in a country that's run by a left-wing version of a Labor government.